Okay, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today, members of the House Committee. Just give me 1 second. I'm having a little technical difficulty right now. Okay, so as the speaker said, my name is Lyons. I'm here to speak today because the second time in my 20s, I am waiting for an organ transplant due to kidney failure. This loss of control regarding so many aspects of my life and waiting for an organ transplant has had me thinking for many times about what I would say to you, those with the power to make changes in this place where decisions are made. Like so many Americans, Medicare for all would have changed the course of so many aspects of my life and provide comfort for my future. The first time I found out I was sick, I was at a hospital in the middle of college midterms week, and they were waking up for an emergency appendectomy. The diagnosis was not adequately explained, and there was no follow-up care that one would expect. As a struggling college student, I didn't have the luxury to see a doctor anywhere besides the emergency room. Because of this, I didn't know how truly sick I was, and because of my illness, I ended up failing out of school, which further delayed my career and cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Years later, I would found out at that time I already should have been looking for a transplant because I was in the end stages of kidney failure, not told just to watch my sodium, or not just to watch my sodium as I was told. Had I had regular access healthcare, blood tests, anything like that, the extent of my organ failure could have been stalled or even prevented had it been caught early enough. While waiting for my first transplant, instead of resting and conserving the little energy I did have, I was working 50+ hours a week on my feet and at a bar and at a gym to afford my doctor's appointments and medications. For those who don't know, potential transplant patients are evaluated for stability as to not waste the gift of an organ. They look at your housing, your economic status, your compliance with doctors. Not being able to afford medication or appointments could have disqualified me for the organ I needed to live at any point. Medicare for all would have meant not deciding if I need to skip meals to afford to qualify for a kidney. I wouldn't have had to work myself to the bone while incredibly sick. I was lucky enough to receive a transplant in 2016, but am again in organ failure. This round of organ failure, I can say with 100% certainty, would have been prevented by Medicare for all. I wasn't able to get regular transplant checkups because of the resources I had allotted for healthcare went towards mitigating the symptoms of long-term COVID. Because of the lack of care, I had no idea my body was rejecting my transplant as a complication of said long-term COVID. I haven't been able to properly work or attend class adequately since winter 2020. The COVID symptoms transitioned into kidney failure symptoms so seamlessly to the point I didn't realize what was happening. All I had needed was a simple blood test, and the rejection would have been caught earlier. When rejection is caught quickly, it is very treatable. I unfortunately wasn't that lucky. It was amazing I was alive for the second time in my life. Since June, I have had 6 long-term hospital stays, with the longest being 7 weeks, travel 12 hours a week, 3 times a week, 12 hours, 3 times a week for dialysis for 3.5 hours, blood transfusion, chemicals similar to chemo to try and save the kidney and prevent anything from getting worse. And that just ends up making me feel significantly worse. I've had days I'm only able to be awake for 4 hours. There's no way for me to work, finish school, or thrive at all in this condition. On top of this, I had no insurance when this first started until Medicare kicked in, which took 6 months from the time I applied. I was told their online system never got my application several times. And then after that, several times the local office had lost my paperwork and never filed it. So for those 6 months, I couldn't access care unless I went to an ER. I ended up going into heart failure as well during this time, which took 4 ERs to catch. But had I been able to see a cardiologist for something as simple as an ultrasound of the heart or an echo, it would have been spotted immediately. I was also told peritoneal dialysis would have been a much better option than the standard hemodialysis that I had to endure because no surgeon would place the right catheter if I didn't have insurance to pay for said surgery. So I have spent the past 6 months getting my the entirety of my blood taken out through a tube in my neck, cleaned and returned to my body, while often going into shock when there's a loss of fluid because it makes your heart unable to pump blood through the body, having horrible insomnia, deep pain and fatigue, 6 months of suffering due to a lack of access to care for a medical situation that should have been prevented in the first place. Medicare eventually kicked in, and now 229 days after my first dialysis session, I am finally switched over to in-home peritoneal dialysis that I should have gotten in the first place. 229 days of my life were robbed from me for reasons out of my control, but preventable for the next person by the elected officials sitting in this room. The experience I briefly shared are but a drop in the bucket compared to my full story. I want to take the time to thank everybody for listening to me, and I implore you to take the time to fully absorb what the words I said meant. This situation is happening across the country, and Medicare for All would prevent it. It is inhumane to present any human being in a situation where they must choose between eviction, a lack of food, or their health care. Thank you.
Thank you.